Imagine for a second that you manufacture foot pedals that control surgical lasers.
And we aren't talking about laser pointers here. These are class 4 medical lasers.
Right, exactly. Devices that are so powerful that, an accidental activation could instantly cause severe collateral tissue damage or burns or even blindness.
It's incredibly high stakes.
Very high stakes. So a customer reaches out to you and tells you that 6 of your pedals just failed a calibration verification test at their facility. You open an official corrective action form, and under the field labeled root cause, you simply write nothing. You leave it completely blank.
Just totally blank.
Yeah. And, a few months ago, the FDA might have dug through your design files to figure out how this happened, but as of February 2, 2026, that literal blank space just triggered a historic first-of-its-kind warning letter.
Oh, yeah, it really did.
So, welcome to today's deep dive. We are speaking directly to you, the senior quality assurance and regulatory affairs professionals, the ones who actually have to translate all this dense regulatory text into real functioning systems on the manufacturing floor.
Because, honestly, the landscape you operate in just experienced a tectonic shift. We are now living in the era of the Quality Management System Regulation, or the QMSR.
Okay, let's unpack this. The FDA just completely rewrote the rules for medical device manufacturing, replacing the classic 21 CFR Part 820 that the industry has relied on for decades.
Right, the old QSR.
Exactly. So today, we're going to look at the very first company to get caught in this new regulatory net, and we are going to use their mistakes to figure out exactly how the FDA's new auditing algorithm actually works.
It's a perfect case study.
It really is. To do that, we have to look at the warning letter issued to Linemaster Switch Corporation in May 2026. But, before we get to their specific failures, we need to understand the new trap itself, like what structurally happened on February 2nd.
Well, structurally, the FDA basically aligned its regulations with the International Consensus Standard, which is ISO 13485.2016.
Okay.
For decades, the FDA operated on its own distinct subparts within the old QSR. You had your design controls over here, your corrective and preventive action, your KPA over there, and your production controls in their own little silo.
So very compartmentalized.
Completely.
Yeah.
And the foundational expectation that you will build a safe and effective medical device hasn't changed. But the syntax is entirely different now. The clause structures have shifted. And most importantly, the psychological lens through which an FDA auditor views your corporate data is fundamentally different.
I was trying to visualize this earlier, and it feels like a total change in inspection philosophy.
Yeah.
Like under the old rules, the FDA audited you like a health inspector looking at individual ingredients in a restaurant's pantry.
Okay, I like that.
They'd check the flour, check the eggs, and if each ingredient looked okay in isolation, you passed. But now, under QMSR, it's like they're auditing the recipe itself. They're following the ingredients from the fridge to the prep station to the pan to the plate just to see exactly where the contamination happens.
That is the perfect mechanism to describe it, honestly.
Yeah.
Because under the new QMSR, the FDA auditor is evaluating the system holistically. Under the old QSR, it was incredibly easy for a company to just, treat regulatory requirements as disconnected checkboxes.
Right, like risk management lived in the engineering department.
Exactly. Rework lived in the manufacturing department. Customer complaints lived in post-market surveillance.
Total silos.
Total silos. Under QMSR, the FDA expects to see a continuous, unbroken thread running across the entire product lifecycle. If one department drops the thread, the whole system unravels.
And to see exactly how fast that unraveling happens in the real world, we turn to Linemaster Switch Corporation. As I mentioned in the beginning, they manufacture foot pedal accessories for medical devices, and they just received the landmark warning letter, the very first one under the new QMSR regime.
Yeah, and the FDA auditor walked into their facility and immediately identified a break in that thread we were talking about.
Right out of the gate.
Right out of the gate. The very first citation falls under ISO 13485.2016, Clause 7.1, which governs product realization.
Okay.
The FDA cited Linemaster because they failed to have a process FMEA, a failure mode, and effects analysis for a specific laser foot pedal on their manufacturing floor.
Wait, I need to stop you there and push back a little.
Yeah.
A missing process FMEA sounds like a paperwork error, like just a missed document in a binder. Why is the FDA treating a missing piece of paper like a critical safety hazard right out of the gate in this new era?
Because of what that piece of paper represents functionally. It is not just documentation, It is the blueprint for how you predict and prevent failure during assembly.
Oh, I see.
And this perfectly encapsulates the shift to the QMSR.
Hmm.
Under the old QSR, risk management was heavily associated with design controls. Engineers would build a risk file during development, pat themselves on the back, and put it on a shelf.
Job done.
It's exactly job done. But Clause 7.1 is about product realization, the actual physical manufacturing processes.
So the FDA is saying that risk isn't a theoretical exercise anymore. It has to actually govern what the operators are doing on, like, Tuesday morning.
Precisely. If you don't have a process FMEA evaluating the risks on your assembly line, you are flying blind. You don't know what happens if a machine calibrates a millimeter too far to the left, or, if an operator uses the wrong adhesive.
Right.
You are in direct violation of Clause 7.1 because you haven't integrated risk into your daily operations.
And Linemaster immediately proved why flying blind on the floor is so dangerous. Let's look at what actually happened during assembly. This brings us to their citation under Clause 8.3.4, which covers rework.
Yeah, this one is wild.
It is. Linemaster had a specific production run where an assembler was reworking foot pedals because they had just failed a calibration test. And what did the assembler do?
Nothing good.
Seriously. They failed to apply the proper torque, they failed to recalibrate the units after tweaking them, and absolutely none of this rework was documented.
Which is terrifying when we go back to the clinical application. These pedals control surgical lasers.
Right.
Let's think about the mechanics of that. If an assembly doesn't apply the specified torque to internal components, the mechanical resistance of that pedal changes. A surgeon relies on muscle memory and foot pressure to deliver an exact wattage of laser energy to a patient's tissue.
Wow, okay. So inadequate calibration could lead to unintended laser activation.
For a massive spike in power delivery. The FDA cited them under Clause 8.3.4 because they failed to perform rework in accordance with documented procedures that actually evaluate the adverse effects of that rework on the final product.
So they have an undocumented, risky rework process happening on the floor. But what happens when that flawed device actually makes it out the door and into a hospital? Like, how did their system handle the inevitable blowback?
Well, poorly.
Yeah, that's what leads to the CPA citation. And this is the one that honestly made my jaw drop. Clause 8.5.2, corrective action.
This is where we see the blank space.
Right. Linemaster received a SCAR, a supplier or customer request for corrective action. A customer explicitly told them that 6-foot pedals failed a calibration verification test on site. The FDA auditor pulls this official corrective action record, and the root cause field is literally left blank. Just blank. And the corrective action field is marked NA.
It just demonstrates a total collapse of the quality system's feedback loop. I mean, a customer hands you a critical failure on a silver platter, and your official corporate record essentially shrugs its shoulders.
Yeah.
Clause 8.5.2 demands a rigorous investigation into the cause of nonconformities to prevent their recurrence. By leaving the root cause blank, Linemaster proved they had no mechanism to investigate their own failures.
But wait, doesn't an electronic quality management system usually require those fields to be filled out before you can close a ticket?
Usually, yes, which means either their software allowed them to bypass mandatory fields or they were using paper systems that nobody reviewed.
Wow.
Either way, the FDA isn't just looking at the blank space. They're looking at a management team that signed off on a blank space.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the auditor didn't stop at the paperwork. They tied the calibration failures directly to the physical room the devices were built in.
Right, the environment.
They cited Linemaster under Clause 6.4.1 for work environment and Clause 7.6 for software validation.
What's fascinating here is how the ISO structure explicitly forces these disparate concepts together. The FDA discovered that Linemaster had a known issue where temperature fluctuations in their facility caused a sensor's output to drift.
Okay.
And this drift led to measurement inaccuracies over time. Yet, they had no controls in place to monitor the ambient temperature of their work environment to ensure that their calibration equipment remained accurate.
And the only control they did try to implement was a total disaster. They had some monitor program software labeled TM118 that was supposed to track things.
Supposed to, yeah.
But during validation, that software lacked raw data, it lacked statistical analysis, and it didn't even have pass-fail criteria. They didn't even verify that the software accurately measured the output values it was supposed to be monitoring.
So you have a work environment where the temperature actively ruins the calibration of surgical equipment, and the only safeguard is an unvalidated piece of software pretending to keep an eye on it.
Just a perfect storm.
Exactly. Under the QMSR, the FDA leverages Clause 6.4.1 to point out that When environmental conditions can have an adverse effect on product quality, you must document and monitor that environment. It brings environmental controls, calibration, and software validation into a very tight logical relationship.
So that is the Linemaster warning letter, the QMSR, in action. It's holistic, it's interconnected, and it leaves nowhere to hide. But, to truly grasp the magnitude of what the FDA is doing here, we have to look backward. To understand this new trap, we need to see how the FDA behaved under the old rules just months prior.
Exactly. Holding the old enforcement paradigm up against the new one makes the shift in the FDA's expectations incredibly clear.
Let's start with risk management. This siloed approach versus the life cycle approach. We just saw Linemaster get hit under Clause 7.1 for lacking a process FMEA on the manufacturing floor.
Right.
Now, contrast that with Envoy Medical. They received a late QSR-era warning letter in November 2025 for their esteemed the second implantable hearing system.
Yeah, and Envoy was cited under the classic QSR citation for risk, which is 21 CFR 820.30 design validation. Under the QSR, risk was almost entirely trapped in the design file. It was an engineering exercise.
And Envoy's engineering exercise was incredibly siloed. Let's look at the mechanics of what they did. They were evaluating 3 different contamination sources in their manufacturing process. One was an issue with filtered air, one was a contaminated water system, and one was physical contamination left on an assembly. Now, all 3 of these hazards lead to the exact same clinical outcome for the patient, which is a severe infection from a sterile implantable device. But Envoy assigned them completely different severity ratings in their risk analysis.
It's just wild. They rated the air and water contamination as a severity level, indicating, quote, temporary health problems requiring routine medical care. But the assembly contamination was rated as a severity level, indicating life-threatening consequences.
For the exact same patient outcome, an infection in the skull from an implant is an infection, regardless of whether it came from the air or a dirty workstation. And to make matters worse, they completely missed endotoxin risks on their finished device.
Yeah, and let's explain why missing endotoxins is such a critical failure. Endotoxins are not live bacteria.
Yeah.
They are the structural components, the toxic outer membranes of dead gram-negative bacteria. If you use contaminated water during manufacturing, and then you sterilize the final device, the live bacteria die.
But the fragments are still there.
Exactly. The endotoxin fragments remain on the implant. When that implant goes into a patient, those fragments trigger a massive, sometimes fatal immune response.
Oh, wow.
Envoy only tested their water system for live bioburden and assumed that was good enough. They entirely missed the endotoxin hazard on the finished product.
So Envoy got cited under design validation because their hazard analysis document was inconsistent. But Linemaster got cited under product realization because they lacked a risk process on the floor.
This raises an important question for QARA leaders right now. Where does your risk live? The FDA is signaling that under QMSR, you can't just point to a design document from 5 years ago and say, well, we did risk.
Yeah, check the box.
Doesn't work anymore. Risk is a living, breathing life cycle requirement that must span all operations.
Let's move to our next comparison, KPA and complaint handling, blanks versus blind spots. We talked about Linemaster leaving the root cause field literally blank under QMSR Clause 8.5.2.
Right.
But let's look at Zoll Medical's warning letter from April 2026, cited under the old QSR 820.100A for a KPA procedures. This wasn't a blank form. This was a sophisticated automated system that completely blinded itself.
Yeah, Zoll manufactures the 731 series ventilators. These are life-supporting devices. They breathe for patients who literally cannot breathe for themselves.
High risk.
Extremely high risk. Zoll was having major compatibility issues where the ventilators were completely shutting down in the field when placed too close to MRI machines. The strong magnetic fields were interfering with the internal electronics and valves. This is a catastrophic failure that eventually led to a class, I recall.
But the recall was heavily delayed. Why? Because Zoll's statistical complaint trending algorithm was fundamentally flawed. Let's break down how this algorithm actually worked. When a hospital reported that a ventilator shut down near an MRI, Zoll would bring the device back. A QA technician would test it on a bench in their lab. But there is no giant magnetic field in the QA lab, so of course the ventilator would work perfectly on the bench.
And because it worked on the bench, the technician would code the complaint as no fault found. Sometimes they would code it user error, or if the hospital didn't send the device back, they coded it no product returned.
But the algorithm was programmed to only escalate confirmed hardware failures. Every time a technician entered no fault found, The algorithm stripped that complaint out of the danger queue.
Just made it disappear.
Right. It essentially told the management team, hey, nothing to see here. The statistical trend doesn't meet the escalation criteria.
It creates an illusion of control. No fault found acts as a shield to avoid opening a CAPI. They had dozens of complaints about ventilators shutting down and jeopardizing patients, but their data suggested everything was fine.
Wow.
Whether it is a literally blank form under QMSR clause 8.5.2 like Linemaster, or a flawed trending algorithm under QSR 820.100A like ZOL, the FDA is hunting for the exact same thing. They're hunting for quality systems that fail to eliminate the root cause of nonconformities.
So the expectation is the same, but the lens is different.
Exactly. The difference now is that the QMSR demands a very explicit systemic focus on corrective action, preventing these issues from hiding in your data.
Let's look at one final comparison, rework. Linemaster got hit under ISO clause 8.3.4 because an assembler didn't apply torque to a laser foot pedal. Let's contrast that with Longhorn Vaccines and Diagnostics from February 2026.
Sure, Longhorn is a specification developer for the Prime Store MTM device. This is a transport medium used for stabilizing and transporting highly infectious samples, specifically things like influenza and tuberculosis.
Tuberculosis, okay.
Yeah, and they were cited under the old QSR requirement for rework, 21 CFR 820.90B2.
The stakes here are visceral. We are talking about a tube designed to hold aerosolized tuberculosis during transport in a van or, testing in a diagnostic lab. And the FDA found that Longhorn was reworking non-conforming devices that had, quote, leaky caps, specs, and floaters.
I mean, a leaky cap on a tuberculosis transport tube is a massive biological hazard.
Yeah, I'd say so.
But when Longhorn reworked these lots, they did not conduct any retesting or reevaluation of the product after the rework. They just tweaked the caps and sent them out the door.
No testing at all.
None. They made no determination of what adverse effects the rework might have had on the structural integrity of the tube.
So what does this all mean? The mechanics of the failure are identical to Linemaster.
It means the core regulatory expectation for safety is a constant. The FDA expected Longhorn to test their reworked leaky caps under the old 820.90, just as they expected Linemaster to document the rework of their foot pedals under the new ISO's clause 8.3.4.
Right.
The sin is the same, failing to rigorously control non-conforming product. But the citation syntax has shifted directly to the ISO structure. If you are a QA professional auditing your own rework procedures today, you must map them to 8.3.4, not the old QSR subparts.
Which brings us to the most important part of this deep dive. We've explored the psychological shift. We've seen how the FDA hunts for blind spots in data, rather than just engineering flaws. How do you, the senior QARA leader listening right now, bulletproof your systems based on this intelligence? What are the immediate, actionable takeaways?
Well, number one, you must de-silo your risk management immediately. As we saw with Envoy and Linemaster, you can no longer point an auditor to a static design hazard analysis.
Right. It can't just be on a shelf.
Exactly. Process FMEAs and production risk controls are strictly required on the floor under QMSR Clause 7.1. Risk must dictate how your operators work every single day.
Okay, and number two, you need to audit your KPI escalation and your complaint coding algorithms today. Like right now. Look at the mechanics of your software. Do not let no fault found or user error become a shield that prevents your system from triggering an investigation, like Zeal did with their ventilators. And for the love of all things regulatory, ensure your electronic systems absolutely prevent a root cause field from being left blank on a scar like Linemaster. An auditor seeing a blank space is just an invitation to tear your entire system apart.
It really is. And number three, update your terminology and map your processes. Ensure that your legacy standard operating procedures map explicitly to the ISO 13485.2016 clauses.
So if you have an environmental control issue
impacting your manufacturing floor, you need to be prepared to defend it under clause 6.4.1 for work environment, linking it directly to your equipment calibration. We connect this to the bigger picture. These warning letters are not just punishments for specific companies.
Right.
They are a roadmap published by the FDA. They are showing you exactly how they are going to conduct your next audit.
The QSR era is officially over. The Linemaster warning letter proves that the FDA isn't just paying lip service to the QMSR transition. They are on the ground, actively enforcing the specific ISO clauses, and they are looking at how your data systems either illuminate or hide your failures.
They are enforcing the holistic view. They're looking at how your room temperature affects your calibration torque, how your software monitors that temperature, and how your risk management oversees the entire interconnected process.
We want to thank you for spending your time with us on this deep dive into the regulatory sources. We know how demanding your role is and how high the stakes are for the patients who rely on your devices. We hope this intelligence helps you navigate the new QMSR landscape with confidence.
It is a complex transition, but it is entirely manageable when you understand the mechanics of the auditor's new lens.
I want to leave you with a final, lingering thought. Linemaster got slapped with a historic first-of-its-kind warning letter because an FDA auditor saw a literal blank space on a root cause form. It makes you wonder. If an FDA auditor walked into your facility tomorrow and pulled a random statistical sample of your closed complaints from last Tuesday, how many hidden NAs, undocumented reworks, or no-fault founds are lurking in your legacy quality records right now, just waiting to trigger a brand new QMSR citation?